The wedding hall was filled with shimmering lights, the air heavy with perfume and whispers. Yet, amidst the laughter of guests and the clinking of glasses, a young bride sat still on the stage, her face hidden beneath a veil that could not conceal her trembling lips or the tears streaming down her cheeks. Her henna-stained hands clutched the edge of her dress as though holding on for dear life. She had dreamed of a love that would sweep her off her feet, of a partner who would cherish her youth and spirit, but those dreams had shattered the moment her family announced her marriage, to a man old enough to be her father. She had begged her parents, pleaded with her mother to understand her heart, but the answer had been firm. They spoke of financial security, of how this man's wealth would save them from disgrace and debt. Her father's stern voice had echoed in her mind as she sat on the decorated couch, "This is your duty. He will provide for you. You will thank us one day." Thank them. How could she ever thank them for chaining her life to a stranger with silver hair and wrinkled skin? The man, her husband now, sat beside her, dressed in an elegant sherwani that spoke of wealth and power. His hands were steady, his smile calm, but she avoided even looking at him. Every time she dared to glance at his profile, her stomach turned with fear and disgust. He seemed composed, unaffected by her tears, and that angered her even more. Didn't he see how broken she was? Didn't he care that she was here against her will? The guests whispered. Some pitied her, others mocked her fate. She could feel their stares burning into her skin, every murmur like a knife to her heart. Poor girl, sold off to an old man. At least she'll live in comfort. Their words twisted inside her like poison, and she bit her lip to stop herself from screaming. The rituals went on like a blur. The garland exchange, the vows, the signatures, all felt like chains tightening around her wrists. Her tears refused to stop, dripping silently onto her lap. She tried to imagine a way out, but there was none. Her family had sealed her fate, and she was trapped. When the time came to leave her parents' home, she clung to her mother's embrace desperately, as if she might melt into her arms and disappear. Her mother's eyes brimmed with tears too, but there was no courage in them, only resignation. "Be strong, my child," she whispered. Strong. How could she be strong when she was being sent into darkness? The car ride to her new home was suffocating. She sat stiffly beside her husband, staring out the window, refusing to acknowledge his presence. The silence was thick, broken only by the sound of the car's engine and her quiet sobs. He did not speak, did not try to console her, and she wondered if this was his true nature, cold, distant, and detached. When they finally arrived at the grand mansion, she felt no awe at its towering gates or glittering chandeliers. To her, it was a prison disguised as a palace. The servants welcomed them with bows and smiles, but their curious eyes lingered on her red, swollen face. Shame consumed her. She was led to the bridal chamber, a room decorated with roses, candles, and silken sheets. It should have been a setting of joy, but to her, it felt suffocating. The scent of flowers was too sweet, making her nauseous. She stood frozen by the door, her heart pounding as she imagined what awaited her. The thought of being touched by him, of being his wife in the truest sense, filled her with dread so strong that her knees shook. As she sat on the edge of the bed, still trembling, she thought of the girl she once was, full of dreams, laughter, and hope. That girl seemed to have died today, buried beneath the weight of this unwanted marriage. Her tears blurred her vision once more, and in the silence of the vast room, she whispered to herself, "My life is over." She didn't know yet that fate had prepared a revelation that would shatter all her assumptions. But for now, all she knew was despair, loneliness, and the cruel reality of being a bride who wept on the day she was meant to smile. The heavy silence in the bridal chamber weighed on her chest like an iron cage. The room was glowing with golden candlelight, every corner adorned with flowers, yet none of it reached her heart. She sat stiffly at the edge of the bed, her veil slipping down, revealing her tear-stained cheeks. Her hands fidgeted in her lap as she braced herself for what she thought was inevitable, the moment her new husband, the old man she resented, would claim her as his wife. Her heart raced with fear at every sound, the rustle of his footsteps, the faint creak of the door closing behind him. She didn't dare look up, but she felt his presence across the room, steady and calm. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable, and finally, she risked a glance. He was standing by the window, his back to her, looking out into the night as though giving her space. His posture was straight but not intimidating, his hands clasped loosely behind him. She expected him to approach her at any moment, to demand what he had bought with his wealth, but he didn't. Instead, his voice broke the silence, deep, calm, and unexpectedly gentle. "You don't have to be afraid." She blinked, stunned. Her lips parted, but no words came. He turned slowly and met her eyes, his expression unreadable yet soft. "I know you don't want to be here," he said. "I saw it in your tears at the wedding. I am not blind." Her chest tightened. Shame and anger tangled in her throat. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that yes, she despised this marriage, that she hated him for stealing her future. But his tone, so quiet and respectful, stole the words from her lips. He took a step closer, but not threateningly. Instead, he pulled out a chair from the corner and sat down at a safe distance, as if making sure she felt no pressure. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his eyes steady on hers. "I will never force you. Not tonight, not ever. You are free to take your time, to hate me if you must. But I will not touch you against your will." Her breath caught. She had braced herself for the worst, but these words were nothing she had prepared for. She stared at him, confused. Was this a trick, some cruel game? "Why?" she whispered hoarsely, her first words since they entered the room. "Because I respect you," he answered simply. "Marriage should not be a cage. I know what you think of me, and perhaps you are right. I am older than you deserve, and this marriage was not your choice. But I promise you, I will never be the monster you fear." Her tears welled again, though this time not from fear. Something inside her stirred, a flicker of disbelief mingled with reluctant relief. She had imagined him as a greedy old man, eager to exploit her youth, but his words painted another picture. He leaned back in the chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "You must be exhausted. Rest tonight. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for now, you need peace." His voice softened, almost fatherly, yet not patronizing. "The bed is yours. I'll sleep elsewhere." Before she could even process, he stood, walked to a small couch near the window, and laid down with a blanket, turning his back to her. The gesture stunned her more than his words. She had thought this night would be her undoing, yet here he was, giving her space, giving her dignity. Minutes passed, and she sat frozen, her mind whirling. Could this really be true? Was he genuinely different from the cruel, selfish image she had painted in her heart? She hugged her knees to her chest, watching his still form by the window. He wasn't pretending to sleep, his breathing was steady, peaceful. For the first time that day, her fear eased slightly. She lay down on the bed, her tears slowing, not from sorrow but from the strange comfort of safety she hadn't expected. Her thoughts lingered on his words, "I will never force you." They echoed in her mind like a fragile promise she didn't know she needed. The night stretched on quietly, and though her heart was still heavy, something had shifted. She didn't know it yet, but the chains around her soul had begun to loosen. The dreaded first night, which she thought would scar her forever, had instead left her with a question that stole her sleep: who was this man she had married? The days after the wedding passed in a haze, yet they were nothing like the nightmare she had feared. Each morning, she would wake expecting demands, expecting his presence looming over her, but he remained distant, almost cautious. He kept to his own space, never intruding, never forcing conversation unless necessary. It bewildered her. The mansion was vast, filled with long corridors and countless rooms, but no matter where she went, she felt his quiet presence lingering, protective, not oppressive. The servants treated her with a mix of curiosity and respect. They whispered behind her back, calling her, "Madam," but their eyes often revealed pity. At first, she resented it, but slowly she realized their loyalty was not just toward him but to her as well. He had instructed them clearly. She was to be treated with kindness, with dignity. It unsettled her, for it was so different from the man she had imagined on her wedding night. One evening, as she wandered through the mansion, she found herself drawn to a locked study. The heavy oak door had been left slightly ajar, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and sandalwood. Books lined the shelves from floor to ceiling, but what caught her attention was the desk by the window. Neatly arranged upon it were framed photographs, black and white images of a woman she had never seen before. The woman was young, beautiful, her smile radiant and full of life. In every picture, her husband, the man she had so despised, stood beside her, younger, his eyes lit with a happiness she had never witnessed in him. There was tenderness in the way he looked at the woman, a devotion so deep it leapt out of the frames. Her heart clenched. She stepped closer, studying the photographs with trembling fingers. On the desk lay an old diary, its cover worn and faded. Hesitation gnawed at her, but curiosity overpowered her guilt. She opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting inside. The first few pages were filled with words of love, letters addressed to the woman in the photographs. As she read on, the truth unraveled before her. This woman had been his wife, his first love, who had passed away many years ago. The entries spoke of grief, of sleepless nights, of a heart broken beyond repair. Without her, the house is empty. One line read, "I have wealth, but no warmth. I live, but I do not feel alive." Tears welled in her eyes as she closed the diary. For the first time, she saw him not as the stranger forced upon her but as a man who had endured a pain she couldn't fathom. His calmness, his restraint, his respect toward her, it all made sense now. He wasn't cold, he was carrying wounds of his own. As she stood there lost in thought, she didn't hear the door creak open. His voice startled her. "You found her." She turned sharply, guilt flooding her face. He stood at the doorway, his expression unreadable but not angry. He walked toward the desk slowly, his eyes falling on the photograph of the smiling woman. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a sigh heavy with years of sorrow, he whispered, "She was my wife. My everything." Her throat tightened, but she remained silent. "I married you," he continued, his voice low, "not because I wanted to replace her, and not because I sought happiness for myself. I married you because your family was drowning in debt. I could not stand by and watch you be ruined, sold to men far worse than me. I thought, perhaps I could at least protect you, even if you hated me." His honesty struck her harder than any harsh word could. She had painted him as selfish, but here he was, admitting he had married her not for his desires but for her survival. Her tears spilled freely. She couldn't stop them. All this time, she had cursed him in her heart, resented his age, his presence, his wealth. Yet now she saw the truth. A man who had already given his heart once and lost it, and who now gave her freedom when he had every power to cage her. For the first time, she looked at him not as an old man, not as a stranger, but as a human being whose scars were deeper than her own. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. I didn't know." His eyes softened, though sadness lingered in them. "You were never meant to know. I never wanted to burden you with my past. But since you've seen, I can only hope you understand." She nodded, unable to form words. The silence that followed was no longer heavy with fear but with revelation. Something inside her shifted that night, a crack forming in the wall she had built around her heart. And for the first time since her marriage, she did not feel like a prisoner in his home. She felt like she was standing at the doorway of a truth that could change everything. That night, the house was quiet, the kind of silence that made every sound echo louder than it should. She lay on the edge of the bed, her thoughts racing with everything she had discovered. The photographs of his late wife, the diary filled with grief, the confession he had spoken with such honesty, it all weighed on her chest. She had been so consumed by her own despair that she hadn't once stopped to wonder what he carried in his heart. Her tears came again, but they weren't the same bitter tears she had shed on her wedding day. These were softer, born from guilt and a strange, unexpected tenderness. She pressed her hands to her face, whispering into the silence, "What have I done? How many cruel thoughts did I hold against him, when he never once wronged me?" Unable to bear the heaviness, she rose from the bed and padded quietly across the room. He was, as always, on the small couch by the window. His figure looked lonelier than ever in the dim light, his broad shoulders slouched as though the weight of years pressed down on him. She stood there for a moment, hesitant, watching the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Then, before fear could stop her, she spoke softly. "Why do you sleep there, when the bed is empty?" His eyes opened slowly, surprise flickering in them as he turned to face her. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, with a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he said, "Because I didn't want you to feel trapped. The bed belongs to you, not me. Her throat tightened, fresh tears burning her eyes. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. All this time, I thought you would take everything from me. But instead, you've given me nothing but space and respect. And I've been so blind. He sat up slowly, his expression still calm, though she could see the flicker of pain behind it. I never wanted your tears, he said. I only wanted you to be safe. If you never learn to love me, I can live with that, but I could not live with being the cause of your suffering. The sincerity in his voice shattered the last of the walls around her heart. She sank onto the couch beside him, her hands trembling as she reached for his. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but steady. I thought my life was over the day I married you, she whispered, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. But now I see, you saved me. You gave me dignity when you had every right to take it away. How could I not have seen it before? His breath caught, and for the first time since she had known him, his composure faltered. His eyes softened, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. I am not asking for your love, he said quietly. I only ask that you live without fear. If one day, your heart finds room for me, I will count myself blessed. Until then, I will wait. She shook her head, her tears falling onto his hand. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. You don't need to wait. My heart, it has already begun to change. For a long moment, silence enveloped them. Then, slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He stiffened in surprise, then relaxed, his hand coming up to rest lightly over hers. The gesture was simple, but for her, it was everything. The girl who had cried on her wedding day, who had cursed her fate and wished for escape, now found herself weeping again, but this time, her tears carried gratitude, humility, and a fragile, budding affection. Outside, the night deepened, and the mansion stood in its usual grandeur. But within those walls, something profound shifted. Two souls, one broken by the past, the other weighed down by unwanted duty, had finally begun to find each other in the most unexpected way. For the first time since her marriage, she closed her eyes not with dread but with a quiet sense of peace. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this: she was no longer alone, and her life was not the prison she once thought it to be. Instead, it was the beginning of a love story she never believed possible.